Okay, stop. Before you scroll past this, I need you to hear me out. This is not a weird video. This is genuinely one of the most overlooked rabbit holes in all of human history. Here's the thing. Half the population has been dealing with menstruation for as long as humans have existed, hundreds of thousands of years. And yet, historians will spend 40 pages on how Romans built their roads and approximately 0 sentences on how a Roman woman managed her period while also, living her life. That's a problem. Today, we're fixing it. Ancient Egypt, Greece, Rome, the Middle Ages, China, the Aztecs, let's go. First, let's get something straight. Women were never passive victims of their biology. Across every civilization, they developed practical, often sophisticated solutions to a universal physical reality. They used what they had. They refined techniques across generations. The modern disposable pad wasn't invented until 1888, and even then, Victorian women were too embarrassed to buy one from a male pharmacist, so the product quietly failed. Everything before that, thousands of years of history, was cloth, wool, sponges, plant fibers, and knowledge passed down through communities of women, and it worked. Let's start in ancient Egypt, because Egypt, as usual, is doing the most. The Ebers Papyrus, one of the oldest medical documents ever found, dating to around 1550 BCE, contains references to gynecological conditions and treatments. They weren't ignoring this, they were documenting it. Egyptian women most likely used softened papyrus or rolls of soft linen, absorbent, reusable, washable, practical, very on brand for a civilization that also invented calendars and dental fillings. But here's the cultural piece, and this matters. In ancient Egypt, menstruation wasn't shameful. It was connected to fertility, to the goddess Isis, to the cycles of the Nile, the literal engine of Egyptian civilization. Women weren't locked away. They continued their lives with minimal disruption. Remember that detail. It becomes very relevant. Ancient Greece gave us democracy, philosophy, mathematics, and also some of the most spectacularly wrong ideas about the human body ever committed to papyrus. I sigh. Aristotle believed menstrual blood was essentially failed semen. His theory that women's bodies tried and failed to produce semen because women were inherently colder and weaker was not a fringe idea. That was the mainstream scientific consensus. Meanwhile, Greek women were actually handling the situation. They used wool, soft, absorbent, and widely available in a civilization built partly around sheep farming. Small wool pads, wool plugs, essentially the earliest tampons. Linen belts to hold things in place. The women had it handled. The philosophers were busy writing nonsense. Rome gave us aqueducts, concrete, legal systems, and also Pliny the Elder, the ancient world's version of that guy at a dinner party who has a confident take on everything and is wrong about most of it. According to Pliny, menstrual blood could kill crops if a woman walked through a field, blunt swords if she touched them, turn wine to vinegar, kill bees, make dogs go mad, and repel hailstorms. Ancient Rome essentially believed women on their period were walking environmental hazards. Roman women obviously did not believe they were personally responsible for agricultural disasters. Life continued. Markets were visited, temples attended, children raised. Roman women used soft cloth, wool, and sea sponges. The Mediterranean had easy access to natural sea sponges, absorbent, soft, reusable after washing. Wealthy women had fine linen and household staff to handle everything. Poor women had rougher cloth and whatever else was available. That gap between what wealthy women could access and what ordinary women could manage runs through every civilization in this video. It is ancient and it is consistent. The Middle Ages get a bad reputation for hygiene, and that reputation is not entirely undeserved. For most medieval European women, free bleeding was likely the reality. Thick wool skirts, dark layered undergarments, constant physical labor. Women did not stop working. Wealthier women used cloth rags, folded and held in place by belts, washed and reused. What's fascinating is that medieval physicians actually encouraged menstruation. Galenic theory explained it as the body purging excess blood. Stopping it was considered dangerous. If a woman's period was late, doctors prescribed herbs to bring it on. Parsley, pennyroyal, mugwort, tansy. Several of these actually contain compounds that stimulate uterine contractions. The empirical knowledge was real, even when the theory behind it was wrong. Traditional Chinese medicine approached this completely differently. Unlike Greek and Roman frameworks that treated women as broken versions of men, Chinese medicine treated the female body as a complete system, different, not lesser. Menstruation was a diagnostic tool. The timing, color, and consistency of menstrual blood told physicians about a woman's overall health. Chinese women used cloth pads made from silk or cotton, held in place by woven belts. There's evidence from the Tang Dynasty of undergarments with integrated fabric pouches, functionally the ancestors of modern reusable pads. Herbal formulas to regulate the cycle and reduce cramping were documented, refined, and passed through medical lineages. Some are still in use today. The Aztecs used maguey fibers, the same plant that gives us agave, as absorbent material. Widely available, versatile, practical. And in many indigenous traditions across the Americas, the menstruating woman in her moon lodge wasn't being punished. She was considered to be at her most spiritually potent. Not exile, something closer to a monthly retreat. Here's what ties all of this together. The materials were almost always available. Wool existed everywhere. Cloth existed everywhere. The real variable was never the material. It was the cultural framework surrounding menstruation. When a society decided it was dangerous or shameful, women's movement and social participation were restricted. When a society decided it was sacred or simply biological, women continued their lives. Identical materials, radically different consequences. Men wrote most of the historical record. From the outside, Pliny's list tells us nothing about what Roman women actually experienced. It tells us what Roman men feared. The practical knowledge, generational, embodied, effective, lived in communities of women and was almost never written down. That's a genuine historical loss we're still piecing together. We have museums dedicated to ancient weapons. We reconstruct battle formations in painstaking detail. We make documentary after documentary about emperors and kings. But the daily reality of half the human population barely shows up in mainstream history. Every generation of women in every civilization on every continent dealt with this. They found solutions. They developed knowledge. They passed it down. That is history, genuinely fascinating history. And it's about time we started treating it that way.